Hi. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Tuesday. I don't feel like I haven't been on in a long time. It has been. Hello, 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 hello. Can you guys hear me and see me okay? Let me know. Let's see who is here. Hello, babelets. I know I haven't been live for 2 days, so we're gonna get caught up. We have Kenzie later today, I believe, is already scheduled. Let's see who's here. I saw Debbie, Evie. Hello, hello. ITS, Crease, Tennessee, hoodies, fancy pants, gamer. Hello, hello. Homemade with love. I haven't seen you guys since the last Kenzie live that we did, and oh boy, we need to talk. Um, I probably will do another members only tomorrow. I wanted to get back caught up with the text messages and go through the reports again. So yeah, we should probably do that tomorrow. Members only is coming up. So thank you to all the members that support. I appreciate you so, so much. We're going to be talking about Taylor Parker today. We're going to be reading her appeal, which I believe is the most recent according to my search. Um, from November of 2025. Taylor Parker is the schmurder who cut Reagan's baby out of her belly and unalived Reagan. So it is from the Netflix documentary. I'm sure you guys are all caught up on that. Maternal Instinct. It's a wild case. We have covered this. We did the interrogation, but I wanted to go through the appeal and get just some more of the facts. So I started with the most recent one. As of May 29th, 2026, I believe, she was denied. So I don't know if she's out of appeals, but we'll see. And so, yeah, let's get to this appeal today. I have two court documents that I want to read. I think we might just get through one of them. Um, let's get started. I'll check in with you guys in the chat. It's pretty long, but it's fine. We can get through it pretty quickly, I'm sure. I finally watched it. Okay, so what do you guys think? I know there's a lot going on. I heard was it her boyfriend? Wade, I believe. I've only watched it twice and it was in the background, so I have to like sit down and watch it again. I watched it on Thursday. I heard he's being sued too, so we might review that. It's a crazy case. When I watched it, yes, please make sure you guys hit the like button. That really helps. And shout out to all of you guys that are still here. Although we're going through hurdles with the Mackenzie stuff. I appreciate all of you guys that are still here, and shout out to all the replay viewers and new subscribers as well, and all of those who have unsubscribed. Whatever. Did you see Mackenzie's? Yeah, I did. I want to do it, and I want to talk about it in a members only sync shot. I didn't know, but wait, dude, come on. Yeah, the whole I didn't see her naked for 10 months. People in her family knew that she wasn't able to get pregnant anymore. So I forget what it's called. I'm spacing. Was it a hysterectomy? Is that what she had? I literally work all day with special needs kids and come home to recover via Melly. Oh, thank you, Melissa. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, it's fun here. We have fun. Yeah, hysterectomy. Thank you. My got a video of Mackenzie's. Oh, really? I'd like to see that. Hey, Neat Noodle, what's up, love? And hi. Oh, I already said hi to Evie. Hi, Evie. I finally watched it. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I just feel like it's leaving a lot out, per usual, with these Netflix documentaries. Um, it's brutal what she did. Honestly, it's like demonic. Reagan tried to fight for her life and her babies, and it's just so sad. Um, okay, yeah, take a break. Let's get started. Let me pull up the document. Put a chat. I'm excited to read this because I don't really know. I mean, I know like what I've seen on the documentary. You know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? Yeah, we have a live scheduled for Kenzie Text after this, so been trying to get time to watch, but haven't watched it yet, so I'll just find out what's going on through Melly. Thank you. And hey, Crystal. Okay, so this was filed November 6, 2025. Taylor Renee Parker versus the state of Texas. Opinion. In November of 2022, appellant was tried for and convicted of capital murder of the Penal Code for committing the murder of an individual in the course of committing or attempting to commit a kidnapping. Texas Penal Code 19.03. On the basis of the jury's answers to the statutorily required special issues, appellant was sentenced. Actually, let me move my screen over here. Um, Sorry, hold please. Appellant was sentenced to death. She is on death row, and I believe she's the youngest female on death row in Texas. Um, Direct appeal to this court is automatic. Appellant raises 24 points of error, finding no reversible error. We affirm appellant's conviction and sentence of death. 1. Factual background. At the age of 17, appellant gave birth to her first child, Emerson, with her then boyfriend, Donald. Okay, I like this. I like the little factual backgrounds because we can get caught up on the facts. So if you see me taking notes, it's only because I'm old school and I can't remember everything, and I'd rather write them down. I can't believe she did this, and Reagan's daughter was in the house. I know. You guys, remember, I watched a documentary on YouTube. We should review it. Where they said that her nails were found in her placenta. Is that right? I think she was fighting to survive. Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine. My heart goes out to Reagan's family and everyone involved. Oh, yikes. I don't get it. I don't get it. Okay, but so she gave birth to her first child with Donald. The couple eventually split, and appellant began dating and later married Tommy. At the age of 21, appellant gave birth to her second child, a son named Trey, with Tommy. Okay. Let me keep track. She had to be induced because of a condition called preeclampsia, a pregnancy complication characterized by elevated blood pressure and protein in the urine. Due to this complication, appellant decided to undergo a tubal litigation to prevent future pregnancy. This, in some circumstances, can be reversed, but it eventually failed. 2 years after giving birth to Trey, the appellant had an ectopic pregnancy. An ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy where the egg implants in the fallopian tube instead of in the uterus. During exploratory surgery to resolve the ectopic pregnancy, doctors discovered that the appellant had complex cyst and scarring from endometriosis. Endometriosis is a condition where the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus. With appellant under anesthesia, Tommy authorized doctor to perform a hysterectomy. This bothers me. Ooh. So I get that was her husband, right? Did she say husband? Short-term memory. Yeah. I don't think that's right that he was able to make that call. Is that illegal? Never experienced either one, so I'm over here like, could this be why she lost her damn mind? I don't know how that works. Probably not. She probably had issues. Wait, he authorized? Yeah, that's what it says in here. While under anesthesia. That's like a life thing, a life decision. I thought if you were like about to pass is when people can make a decision for you. This is not okay. What the heck? Oh, feel better, Jules. Thank you for being here. I don't know. Let me know in the chat. That's wild. Okay. Am I tripping? So it says Tommy authorized doctors to perform a hysterectomy. Doctors removed appellant's uterus, cervix, and one of her ovaries. When the appellant woke up from surgery, she flew off the handle. and asked why Tommy didn't wake her up so she could make that decision. Appellant and Tommy divorced in 2017, of course. Soon after, Appellant began dating Hunter. The couple married in 2018. During her relationship with Hunter, Appellant asked multiple friends to serve as surrogates because she wanted to have more children, but could not because of the hysterectomy. Appellant and Parker divorced in 2019. Okay, wait, why am I having trouble keeping track of this? Okay, so she married Donald, right? And they had Emerson. Then she married Tommy and had Trey. Okay. Sorry, I have to work through that. So then she divorces Tommy in 2017. Appellant and Tommy divorced in 2017 after Hunter. The couple married in 2018. During her relationship with Parker, oh yeah, I already read that. Sorry. Okay, so then who was it? Hunter. Dang. Okay. Appellant then began dating Wade. Several witnesses at trial testified that Appellant was obsessed with him and would be ecstatic around him, even though you could tell he didn't feel that way about her. The state introduced evidence of several instances when Appellant went to great lengths to keep Griffin in the relationship. Appellant told Griffin she was pregnant in January of 2020. In the following months, the appellant purchased a silicone moon belly online, as well as a customized ultrasound, prepared a nursery in Griffin's home, had a maternal photo shoot, held a gender reveal party, and chose a name for the baby. What was the baby's name? Clancy? Is that what it was? Appellant's original due date in late September of 2020 passed without appellant giving birth. Appellant told Griffin that she would be induced or have a C-section at Titus Regional Medical Center in Mount Pleasant, Texas on October 5th of 2020. On the morning of October 5th, Griffin's house caught on fire. He was able to put out the fire with a water hose. Later that morning, the medical center received a BOMB threat and had to evacuate. Appellant blamed both of these events on her mother, Shauna. Yo. Maybe it was life or death to her, so he made the decision. Um, unless he's threatening. Yeah, did she like try to sue him, like, or go through that? Because I'm sorry, I would not be okay. I can't fathom marrying someone who never told me they loved me. Hey, simply Clancy. Yeah, Clancy Gale. Thank you, Abby. Okay, let's continue. Appellant told Griffin that in order to avoid her mother, she decided to travel to Idabel, Oklahoma to give birth at McCurtain Memorial Hospital. On the morning of October 9th, 2020, Appellant sent Griffin to drop off Hogs in Wynwood, Oklahoma, and then to meet her at the hospital in Idabel. Instead of traveling to Idabel, Appellant went to the home of Reagan Hancock, whom Appellant knew was pregnant, and arrived at 7:30 a.m. Whoa. She went to her house at 7:30 a.m. in the morning? It's a little early. What followed was characterized by the states as a slaughtered woman in her home and a missing baby, a fetal abduction. The crime scene technician, Mark Sullivan, testified that Reagan was attacked in several places around the house, with multiple strikes in each location, and she continued standing and walking while bleeding. The assault continued while Reagan was on the floor. Oh, this is like so too much. I should have took notes. She be caught in her lie last week. Yo. The medical examiner, Dr. Melinda Flores, testified that Reagan had 113 sharp force injuries, 15 stab wounds, and 98 incised wounds. This is up there with like the Gypsy Roses of the world. And what's another one where like, oh, Idaho 4 involves stuff with a you know what? Um oh, what's her name? Jody. Wow. 113, 15 stab wounds, 90 incised wounds. Two wounds perforated Reagan's jugular vein. Oh, several went all the way to the bone. Reagan also suffered 39 blunt force injuries, primarily to her face and head, as well as a broken nose and 5 skull fractures. Wait, so she beats the crap out of her brutally, I think with a hammer, if I'm not mistaken, right? Stabs her 113 times. Hi, S Dubs. Good to see you. The thought of this is beyond sad. It is, whoa. We kind of already knew this, but like reading it from the document is just like different. 39 blunt force injuries, 5 skull fractures. Dr. Flores testified that the injury to Reagan's head indicated that she may have been hit in the head by a hammer. Dr. Flores also testified that there was evidence of possible strangulation. Reagan lost so much blood in the attack that some of her wounds did not even bleed due to low blood pressure. After unaliving Reagan, appellant performed a crude C-section to remove her unborn baby, Braxlin. Appellant cut a large incised wound going across her lower abdomen with her uterus coming through it. The uterus was also opened. Appellant removed the placenta and the umbilical cord. I can't even. Yeah, I wanna watch that interview. I was hoping we could do it today, but I don't know if we'll get to it today because this is a long document, but I wanna review that interview, Crystal. You are definitely. I feel like I need a drink. Is it 5 o'clock somewhere? Not in California. Um, RIP Reagan. I'm so sorry this happened to you. You know, this is probably a case definitely where I think that the DP served her rightly. Um, She removed the placenta. Cell tower data showed that appellant left Reagan's house between 9:09 and 9:14 a.m. At 9:36 a.m., appellant was stopped by Trooper Lee Shavers after he observed her driving erratically, speeding and almost hitting another vehicle. After contacting appellant, Trooper Shavers observed an umbilical cord going down into her pants and a baby that was not appearing and appeared very limp, kind of white in color. 2 ambulances transported appellant and Braxlin to McCurtain Memorial Hospital. Appellant was arrested at the hospital and Braxlin was later pronounced dead. Appellant was charged with capital murder. The state's theory at the trial was that the appellants intentionally caused the death of Reagan and appellant then and there in the course of committing or attempting to commit the offense of kidnapping. The jury found the appellant guilty of capital murder as alleged in the indictment and answered the punishment phase special issues in favor of the death penalty. Sufficiency of the evidence. In her first point of error, the appellant argues that the evidence is insufficient to support that the aggravating factor, a kidnapping or attempted kidnapping, occurred. Um, I'm so glad this was denied. Like, facts. Kenzie's another situation. I'm going to talk about that on a Kenzie Live, but like, oh my gosh, if she would have got any appeal approved, I probably would have cried. Um, Appellant does not contest that the evidence is sufficient to show that she committed the unaliving of Reagan. Appellant only contends that the state failed to prove that Braxton was born and is alive for the purposes of kidnapping or attempted. Appellant asked the court to reform the judge of conviction from this DP to first degree. Mm. So they wanted it. So they basically they wanted the death penalty off the table. We overrule a parent's first point of error. Applicable law, sufficiency. We review a challenge to the sufficiency of the evidence under the standard of review set forth in Jackson versus Virginia, 1979. Brooks versus State, 2010. Evidence is legally sufficient to support a conviction if, when viewing all of the evidence in the light most favorable to the verdict, any rational juror could have found the essential elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. When conducting a sufficiency review, we considered all of the evidence admitted at the trial, including pieces of evidence that may have been improperly admitted. We do not sit as a 13th juror, and we do not substitute our judgment for that of the fact finder by reevaluating the weight and credibility of the evidence. The jury is permitted to draw reasonable inferences from the evidence adduced at trial. Additionally, the jury may use common sense, common knowledge, and personal experience and observations from life when drawing these inferences. The sufficiency of the evidence is measured against the hypothetically correct jury charge defined by the statutory elements as modified by the charging instrument. The hypothetically correct jury charge is one that accurately states the law, is authorized by indictment, and does not increase the state's burden of proof, and adequately describes the offense which the defendant is charged. Elements. A person commits the offense of capital murder if the person commits this as defined under section 19.02. The person intentionally commits the murder in the course of committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. This is probably going to get flagged. A person commits the offense of kidnapping if he intentionally or knowingly abducts another person. Person is defined as an individual. An individual is defined as a human being who has been born and is alive. A person commits the offense of criminal attempt if, with specific intent to commit an offense, he does an act amounting to more than mere preparation that tends but fails to effect the commission of the offense intended. We have construed the attempt statute to draw an imaginary line that separates an act that amounts to no more than the mere preparation from an act that tends but fails to effect the commission of the offense. The precise intent of section 15.01 is to punish action for the intended offense while allowing intervention before an act which could constitute the offense itself occurs. Appellant does not challenge the sufficiency of the evidence to support the unaliving of Reagan. Instead, appellant only challenges the sufficiency of the state's evidence to show that Braxlin was born and is alive during the kidnapping or attempted kidnapping. We know that the baby was alive though, because didn't they say in the documentary that the baby passed in the ambulance? Or am I not thinking correctly? It hurts my heart, yeah. If it was all for nothing, the baby didn't even survive. And it was decaying by the time she got out of her pants and said it stunk. Oh my gosh. Yeah, she only cared about selling the lie. Whoa. Um, we reject this argument for two reasons. This case totally reminds me of dumbass Alexi Treviso. Ugh, don't get me started with I always say this, I think, with her mom and her. I can't. Alexi Treviso, you need to be in prison, ma'am. Get your ass to prison. Facts. Alexi Treviso is the one that was in the hospital and freaking kills a baby, puts him in the trash. Like, hello, ma'am, you're in the hospital. Just give it. Tell him you don't want the baby, for crying out loud. I can't get over that case. Anyways, I'm getting distracted here, but okay, let's continue. Ugh, puke. Okay, born and alive during the kidnapping. We reject the argument for two reasons. First, when viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the verdict, a rational juror could find beyond a reasonable doubt that Braxlin was born and is alive at the time that the appellant kidnapped her. Second, there was sufficient circumstantial evidence for a rational juror to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that the appellant had taken a step that amounted to more than mere preparation towards kidnapping Braxlin. Elton Crossland, a flight paramedic for Life Net Air, was working with his partner Allison on October 9th, 2020, when they were dispatched to Trooper Shaver's location at 9:37 a.m. They arrived on scene at 9:49 a.m. Crossland testified as follows. Question. Okay, when you arrived on the scene, tell the jury kind of what's going on out there. His response is, we arrived on scene, exited our vehicle, walked back to where Trooper Shavers and bystanders were, and when we got up to the door, there was a woman sitting in the front seat holding a newborn. We could see the baby was gray and ashen color. Umbilical cord was still attached. He then further testified. Question. Have you, in your experience as a paramedic, come across a woman who has given birth outside of the hospital, whether it be in a car or at home or things of that nature? Response. Yes. Question. So when you walked up to the car and you saw the baby with the umbilical cord still attached, what's running through your mind at that time? The paramedic responds, getting the cord clamped and getting the baby into the ambulance so that we can start full blown CPR. The difference being doing compressions and breathing. It only gets you so far. Being an ASL provider or paramedic, there's different rugs I can push to try to improve the outcome. Question. You mentioned the appearance of the baby was ashen. What else did you know about or did you notice about the baby? Response. The amniotic fluid that was still on the baby was dried and flaky, signaling to us that the baby wasn't just born. It had been at least several minutes. Question. And a baby that has just been born, what were you expecting to see? He responds, ideally, when we show up, we would see a baby that was kind of pinkish in color and crying. Question. And the woman, we shall call her Monster. And the monster holding the baby, was she sitting there in the car? Response, yes. When you got there, okay. And she was identified to you as Taylor Parker? Response, yes. Question, what was she doing when you got to the scene and when you walked up to the car and saw the baby? Response, when I walked up to the car, she seemed pretty calm and she was very adamant that if we took the baby, it had to go to Idabel. She seemed fairly calm after doing that. Hey, Gonzalo, this is vile. I know. Oh my gosh. Who? Who's not in jail? Oh, Alexi Treviso. No, that monster too. No, no. She's out free. Question. And when you asked her about how she had the baby or more circumstances, what did she tell you? The response is that she was driving down the road, felt her water break, and that the baby just came out. Question. And when you heard her say that, was your impression that the baby was born in the car that she was sitting in? No. And why not? The birth of a baby is not a very neat or clean process. There was no blood or amniotic fluid in the car or in the seat where she was sitting. To us, it was obvious that the baby was not born in that car. That Braxton had not been born in appellant's car was later confirmed. Question. When you cut the umbilical cord, what did you notice? Response. Normally when you cut it, you get a small amount of blood in it, even when it's clamped. But when we cut it, the blood seemed like it was separated already, kind of the serum from the plasma, and looked like it had blood clots in it. Oh my goodness, this is brutal. Question. What did you think about that? Why was that unusual? It told us again, it reasserted to us that it had been several minutes since the baby was born. It was not recent. Question. So when you first arrived at the scene, you were under the impression that this baby had been born just minutes before your arrival. And based on what you're seeing in your assessment, was that matching up? Response. No. He then testified that treatment to Braxlin was started. Question. Once you were in the back of the ambulance with the baby, what did y'all do? Response. We got an IO, an intraosseous IV. That's probably said that wrong. Started in the left lower leg. We started giving IV fluids and giving doses of epinephrine. We were continuing CPR. We then intubated the patient so we could breathe for her. Question: at the point, did the baby have a pulse? Response: no, she did not. Question: okay, was the baby breathing? No, she was not. Okay, when you first got there and saw the baby, did you notice any signs of life? No. Once you got her in the ambulance, were you able to administer medication? What type of medication were you giving? Epinephrine. And what's that going to do? It's epinephrine is also known as adrenaline. It causes contractility of the heart. It helps restore a pulse in conjunction with CPR. Question: okay. And the jury has heard that the baby was a baby girl. Was that response yes? Question: y'all decided that the closest place is going to Idabel. How long did it take y'all to get there? Answer: I'm not sure off the top of my head. If we could go back to the first page, it's got the times on it. Looks like it took us 34 minutes. Ooh, that's a long time too. 34 minutes. RIP, little baby Braxton. I know. Hey, Joker. Good to see you, love. Answer: I'm not sure off the top of my head. Oh, I already read that. Sorry. 34 minutes. Question: during the 34 minutes of transport from DeKalb to Idabel, what are you doing to the baby in the back? Answer: we're continuing CPR, continuing to ventilate her with a bag valve mask, continuing to give epi every 3 to 5 minutes, and trying to get her warm. Question: were you eventually able to get a pulse back? Yes. Okay, so by the time you arrived at the Ida Bell Hospital, the baby had a pulse? Answer: yes. And that is reflected here on the vital signs taken at 10:37 that there was a pulse. Yes. When you arrived at the Ida Bell Hospital, what happens there at the hospital? He responds, one of the OB nurses met us outside. I guess there had been some miscommunication. I think they thought we were coming in with just a baby that had been delivered. We came out of the back of the truck. The heart rate was less than 60. So we were still doing chest compressions and she was still not breathing. So we were breathing for her. So they took us up to the second floor to their OB unit. He then testifies that he observed no cuts, scrapes, or abrasions or visible injuries on Braxlin. On cross-examination, he further explained his observations about Braxlin's heartbeat. Question: but you said that there was a heartbeat at some point. Response: yes. Now, how did you know that? Because you had placed monitors on the chest? He says, we saw changes on the monitor, which is signaled to us. We had her on end tidal capnography, waveform capnography. On our monitor, we saw spike in that reading, which in a cardiac arrest signifies a return of circulation. Question: but it doesn't indicate whether it's going to be maintained or not? It does not. And that was it just very faint? He says the capnography reading was very good and it stayed. Now, the pulse that we felt, I could actually palpitate with my fingers and feel it, but it was very weak. On redirect examination, he testified. Question: I remember talking to you, and you said that when y'all got the pulse back, and by back, if a baby is still born and born without a pulse, there's no pulse to get back. Does that make sense? He says, correct. Okay, from time to time, you got the pulse back. You were excited and thought, we may have saved this baby. He responds, yes, yes. From Idabel back to New Boston, we were on cloud nine. We thought we had done something that, in all honesty, we thought was futile from the time we left the scene. But it's a newborn. I'm not, I mean, we've got something to do. So when we got the pulse back, we thought, wow, this is awesome. Question: and that last question that you were asked, that the baby was never alive, you don't know what the baby's condition was when she was taken via C-section from her mother's womb? He says, no, I do not. Question: you saw the baby at a time later, and your testimony was the conditions were that she had not just been born. He says, that's correct. And if the medical records reflect that the baby's time of death was sometime around 1 o'clock p.m., that baby was alive from when you got the heartbeat back in the ambulance to the time that she was declared deceased. He says yes. Crossland's testimony was corroborated by Dr. William Herron, the doctor in McCurtain County, Oklahoma, that delivers babies. Dr. Herron testified that he had 41 years of experience in the medical field, all at McCurtain Memorial Hospital. Dr. Herron received a call to come into the hospital on the morning of October 9th, 2020, while still at home. Braxton barely had a pulse and no spontaneous respirations when Dr. Heron arrived. He testifies, question, Dr. Heron, in your training and experience, an infant, 7 pounds, approximately 35 weeks gestation, is that an infant who, absent any conditions, is viable? Doctor responds, yes. There it also notes at 10:50 that the pulse was 58. It says pacing. Is that because of the, he responds, external pacemaker? Yes. Dr. Heron further testified just as the paramedic did. Question. Okay, doctor, the questions I'm about to ask you are based on things that have been asked for other witnesses in the courtroom over the past couple of weeks. The baby, as we know now, was brought to the hospital there at 10:26. 10:27, and based on the information given by Taylor Parker to law enforcement at 9:36, she tells us that the baby is about 35 minutes old. So I'm telling you that the information to ask you that if, according to Taylor Parker, the baby was, this is being generous, born about 9 a.m. The doctor says yes. Question. I remember you telling me that the time span of maybe 40 minutes from 9 to 9:45, when LifeNet arrives, if that baby had been dead that entire time, do you believe they would have been able to get a pulse back? He says no. Ooh. I remember you told me that essentially logic tells you that the baby was alive because they were able to get a pulse back. He says yes. Later, on redirect examination, he is asked, okay, so back to my original question to you on direct about if the baby was born deceased about 9 a.m. and the paramedics are not administering these life saving efforts until after 9:45. In your expert opinion, do you believe they would have revived a stillborn or deceased baby? He says, no. This is wild. I don't know the exact due date, actually. I'm just flabbergasted she didn't plan whatsoever for getting caught. You guys, what she did is so evil and brutal. I don't it, we have a hard time understanding, right? The horror Reagan experience. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine. Dr. James Scales, a physician and obstetrics and gynecology at the Genesis Prime Care Clinic, has also testified for the state. Dr. Scales testified that over the course of 20 years, he had delivered approximately 200 babies a year and was familiar with C section procedures. Dr. Scale testified that Reagan, quote, was not having complications during her pregnancy and that Braxton had no abnormalities. Dr. Scales further testified that he was surprised that Braxton had no visible injuries or knife nicks because even trained doctors going through layers of skin carefully and relatively slowly sometimes will nick a baby. Dr. Scales further explained when they asked him, okay, the medical examiner, and actually, I believe it was the doctors from Idabel Hospital, weighed the baby and measured the baby. Those results were that she was 7 pounds and 18.75 inches. So when we're talking about a woman who is 35 weeks pregnant and the baby is that size, would that be, in your experience, a viable baby? He says yes. And doctor, do you recall us showing you some of the autopsy photos in the case of Reagan? He says yes. Okay, and we specifically showed you the one of the cut in the uterus to the back of the uterus. Do you remember that? He says, I remember it. And when I recall, you said it was maybe a little bit bigger than would be necessary, but it wasn't that bad. He says, correct. So your opinion, I think, was the person who had performed that C-section had taken some reasonable care as far as cutting into the uterus. He says they didn't do bad. Ooh, we know she was looking it up like she thought she was like Bill Nye the Science Guy or something. Oh, he wasn't a medical professional, but you know what I'm trying to reference. Um, was he? I thought it was just like space. It was all science, right? Bill Nye. I remember watching him, but something must be wrong with my brain. Making science, yeah, it was accessible and engaging. But he started his career as a mechanical engineer. He invented a hydraulic. Oh yeah, he did all kinds of shite. He expanded his focus to science communication, climate change, advocacy, and space exploration. Okay, so I wasn't like too far off. Let's move on. Lastly, the state called Shanair, we'll go by Jaeger. While Jaeger was at the Bowie County's bi-state jail, she met the appellant. Jaeger was a jail trustee who helped do laundry. A trustee is an inmate who displays good behavior and is permitted to assist with jail operations and move about the jail. Due to her trustee status, Yeager was able to speak to appellant. Yeager testified the following about her conversations with the appellant. Question: did Taylor Parker discuss with you that she had convinced her boyfriend Wade that she was pregnant? Yes. And did she give you a lot of detail on that, or did she just tell you that she had convinced him she was pregnant? She says, not a lot of detail, but that he believed her, that he believed that she was pregnant. She's believable, isn't she? The girl responds, very believable. All right, I want to talk to you about, did Taylor Parker, sorry if you guys can hear my AC in the background. Did Taylor Parker tell you about when she went to cut the baby out of Reagan Hancock? Did she tell you about that? She says, yes. All right. I think you said that started with a knife. Started with a knife that was there and it didn't work as well as she wanted it to. So she went to her vehicle where she had some sort of kit that she used on animals and it had a scalpel. Wait, remind me why she had the scalpel. Bill Nye was an actor. He didn't have any degrees in science. That's actually funny. I bet it killed to answer him, not my whole childhood being destroyed. She got obsessed over her friend and her baby too. I bet she was thinking to attack her too. Wait, so she had a scalpel because they had like farm animals and stuff, right? I still don't see why she would have a scalpel, but a guy who says we thought he was a real scientist. I know, Jules. I'm about to file a lawsuit against the Bill Nye. She brought the scalpel with her. She carried a medical bag around with scalpels and syringes. um, that's wild. All right. So she had a scalpel, and did she use a scalpel to finish cutting the baby out? Yes. Okay. And when that happened after the baby was cut out, what happened after the baby was cut out, Shauna? She said she placed the baby up against Reagan's cheek and told her, tell mama bye. Whoa. It's crazy how much documentaries like leave out. My allergies are bad. Holy, holy cow. What? I mean, that is so demonic. So the baby is alive? She responds, yes, ma'am. And she told the baby, tell mama bye. Yeah. All right. Sorry, hold on a second. Did she tell you that what happened after that, Shauna? Did she get in her car and leave? Shauna says, she says she was going to the hospital. Question, okay. And wasn't going to the hospital because the baby is in distress or anything like that? She says no. Okay, she was on the way to the hospital. In your discussions with me, you said that you believe she wanted to make a record that she had the baby at the hospital. She says, "Yes, ma'am." All right, on her way to the hospital, what happens to the baby? Shauna says, she says she looks over and the baby is not breathing and she pulled over. Okay. And she pulled over? Yes. She didn't tell you that she got pulled over? She says no. She told you that she pulled over. She pulled over. Okay. And then she tells you that, what did she tell you about the cord, the umbilical cord, and all of that? Shauna says that it was coming out of her pants. Question. And that the first responders just, Shauna says, assumed that she had given birth with the baby, but she didn't tell them that she had. Shauna says she didn't say she told them, said that they just assumed based on the umbilical cord. Analysis. Kidnapping. The evidence presented at trial, when viewed in the light most favorable to the verdict, was sufficient for a rational juror to find beyond a reasonable doubt that Braxton was born and is alive at the time appellant kidnapped or attempted to kidnap her. Based on Crossland and Dr. Heron's testimony, a rational juror could believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Braxton was not born in the vehicle. Crossland testified that the amniotic fluid on Braxton was dried and flaky. Furthermore, Crossland testified that when the umbilical cord was cut, the blood in the cord was already separated and clotting. Based on this testimony, a rational juror could have concluded that Braxton had been born elsewhere and sometime before the appellant was stopped by the trooper. Rational juror could have also believed that LifeNet paramedics were able to restore Braxton's heartbeat. The paramedic testified that the heartbeat monitor on an end tidal capnography waveform capnography signified a return of circulation. Dr. Heron also testified that Braxton barely had a pulse when he arrived at the hospital. Based on the testimony, a rational juror could have concluded that Braxton was born alive. Both Crossland and Dr. Heron testified that it would have been impossible for the paramedics, based on the known timeline, to restore the heartbeat of a stillborn baby. A rational juror could have credited this testimony and inferred that Braxton must have been born alive at the time of the appellant's crude C section, because if not, the paramedics would not have been able to later restore her heartbeat. Furthermore, Dr. Heron and Scales both testified that Braxton was viable, and Dr. Scales testified that the appellant's crude C section did not harm Braxton and was not poorly performed. A rational juror could have believed that this testimony and inferred that because Braxton was not injured during the C section and was otherwise viable, that she was born alive. Moreover, a rational juror could have also believed Yeager's testimony and credited appellant's confession that Braxton was born alive. Shauna testified that the appellant, after performing the C section, placed the baby up against Reagan's cheek and told her, "You know, tell mama bye." Afterwards, Shauna testified that appellant took Braxton to the hospital, but did not do so because Braxton was in distress. A rational juror could have inferred from the appellant's actions that Braxton was born alive at the time of the C-section, because appellant would not have told a stillborn baby to tell mama bye or taken a stillborn baby to a hospital. Based on Yeager's testimony, a rational juror could have concluded that Braxton was born alive during the C-section and that the appellant was taking Braxton to the hospital until appellant pulled over because she realized Braxton was no longer breathing, at which point Taylor tried to make it appear as though she had just had the baby before she was stopped by the trooper. This is consistent with the paramedic's testimony that Braxton was not born inside the vehicles based on the physical observations that the paramedic made at the scene. Attempted kidnapping. Alternatively, the evidence presented at trial, when viewed in the light most favorable to the verdict, was sufficient for a rational juror to find beyond a reasonable doubt that Taylor had taken a step that amounted to more than mere preparation towards kidnapping the baby. The medical testimony introduced at trial showed that Taylor's crude C-section appeared to be designed to secure a live baby. Dr. Scales testified that the C section did not harm Braxlin and was not poorly performed. Dr. Flores, the medical examiner, testified that Reagan's injuries were focused on the upper body, particularly the head and neck areas. A juror could infer from this testimony that the appellant's assault was directed away from the location of the baby in an attempt to avoid harm to the baby, while the appellant murdered Reagan. Let's read the little footnote. Appellant highlights several pieces of evidence to argue that the evidence was insufficient to allow a reasonable juror to conclude that the baby was born alive. Appellant emphasizes that Braxton's weak pulse was only attributable to external factors to stimulate life, and that Dr. Haram testified that he never witnessed independent life. When the record supports conflicting inferences, we presume that the jury resolved the conflicts in favor of the verdict, and we defer that determination. In appellant's case, the jury was presented with competing evidence and resolved the conflicts and that evidence in the state's favor. The evidence admitted at trial also circumstantially proved that the appellant wanted a live baby. The state introduced evidence that the appellant was unable to get pregnant due to her hysterectomy and faked a pregnancy with Griffin in order to keep him in their relationship. Moreover, the jury heard evidence that the appellant purchased a silicone moon belly online, as well as a customized ultrasound, prepared a nursery in Griffin's home, had a maternal photo shoot, held a gender reveal, and chose a name for the baby, all to further the story of the fake pregnancy. A rational juror could conclude based on this evidence that the appellant intended to kidnap Braxlin alive to complete the fake pregnancy story. What gets me here is like the mom. Okay, so like the mom, thank you, Karina. Love you too. So the mom and the husband knew that she had a hysterectomy. We know Wade, quote unquote, didn't believe her because Taylor had set her mom up as the bad guy. But like, I think this is why Wade is still being sued, right? How could you not, like, after 10 months and you never seen her naked or never felt the belly? Like, I don't know. That just doesn't seem realistic. Even an irrational jury can conclude the baby was born alive. Hi, Divine. Let's continue. In sum, the evidence was sufficient for a rational juror to conclude that the appellant was attempting to kidnap Braxlin. Appellant's crude C-section was an act that amounted to more than mere preparation that tended to a fact of kidnapping. Even if Braxlin was not born and is alive, appellant simply failed to effect the commission of the offense of kidnapping. Although commission of the last proximate act needed for the crime would of course constitute an attempt, we have concluded that the legislator did not intend to draw the imaginary line that close to the offense. In present case, appellant's C-section was an act that amounted to more than just mere preparation and was sufficient to support the aggravating element of attempted kidnapping. Conclusion. When viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the verdict, a rational juror could find beyond a reasonable doubt that Braxlin was born and is alive at the time appellant kidnapped her. Alternatively, a rational juror could find beyond a reasonable doubt that the appellant attempted to kidnap Braxlin. Consequently, the evidence is sufficient to support appellant's judgment of conviction for capital murder. Appellant's first point of error is overruled. 3. Change of venue. In her second and third points of error, appellant contends that the trial court erred by denying her motion for change of venue. Specifically, appellant argues that the trial court erred under the Code of Criminal Procedure and violated her rights under due process clause by denying her motion for change of venue. We overrule both points of error. A change of venue may be granted if the defendant establishes that there exists in the county where the prosecution is commenced so great a prejudice against him that he cannot obtain a fair and impartial trial. When a defendant seeks a change of venue based on publicity about the case, she must show that the publicity was pervasive, prejudicial, and inflammatory. Widespread publicity by itself is not considered inherently prejudicial. The defendant must show an actual identifiable prejudice attributable to pretrial publicity on the part of the community from which members of the jury will come. We review a trial court's ruling on a motion to change venue for abuse of discretion and will uphold the trial court's decision if it is within the zone of reasonable disagreement. The two primary means of discerning whether publicity is pervasive are the hearing on the motion to change venue and the testimony of venor members at voir dire. In Tracy, this court reviewed a challenge to the denial of a motion for change of venue in a death penalty case originating from Bowie County, the same county that the appellant's case originates from. The defendant in Tracy murdered a correctional officer at Barry B. Teleford unit in New Boston, Texas. On appeal, the defendant argued that there was excessive and prejudicial pretrial publicity in Bowie County and that Teleford unit, where Officer Davison was employed, is an important economic entity in Bowie County, creating a likelihood that a fair and impartial trial would be impossible. The defendant filed a motion for change of venue supported by two affidavits. The state filed contravening affidavits in its response to the motion. At a hearing on the motion, the defendant called Brett McQueen, a fact investigator for the defense. The state called two witnesses in rebuttal: Bowie County Judge James Carlo and Bowie County Precinct 2 Commissioner Tom Witten. We concluded testimony at the hearing supports the conclusion that the media coverage was not extensive, inflammatory, or prejudicial. Although there were a number of print and digital newspaper articles, or social media posts relating to the case, there was no estimate of how many people in Bowie County actually received or read these articles. A large part of the testimony related to comments made on articles online, shares on personal Facebook page, and other reactions on social media pages, such as likes, in response to the articles being posted online. But testimony also showed that many of the people commenting, posting, and responding to the articles were not even Bowie County residents and would not be in the jury pool. The record supports, I'm not going to read the next part. Wait, I'll read this. The media coverage was not pervasive, prejudicial, or extensive, and it did not permeate the Bowie County community to such an extent that a fair and impartial trial would be impossible. The trial judge acted within the zone of reasonable disagreement in denying the motion to change venue based on the presence of media coverage. The record supports the trial court's finding that the appellant could receive a fair trial in Bowie County. His second point of error is overruled. This case shares similar facts with Tracy. Appellant filed a motion for change of venue, supported by her own affidavit and the affidavit of two credible residents of Bowie County. The state opposed the motion with its own contravening affidavits. At a hearing on appellant's motion, McQueen, the same investigator as in Tracy, testified about the media coverage in the appellant's case, including news articles in the Texarkana Gazette. Appellant also introduced evidence of comments and interactions on various Facebook groups made by social media users from Bowie County. In rebuttal, the state called three witnesses: Lance Klein, the lead investigator in Taylor's case; Lance Hall, Bowie County emergency management operator; and Robert, the mayor. Both Hall and Robert testified that they believed without a doubt that a fair and impartial jury could be seated in Bowie County. Wait, are they talking? Hall also testified that the reporting was accurate, and he testified that the Gazette required a subscription, so members of the public without a subscription would not be able to access the Gazette's articles. Like in Tracy, the record establishes that the media coverage was not pervasive, prejudicial, or extensive, and it did not permeate the Bowie County community to such an extent that a fair and impartial trial would be impossible. The trial judge acted within the zone of reasonable disagreement in denying the motion to change venue based on the presence of media coverage. Consequently, we cannot say that the denial of the appellant's motion to change venue was an abuse of discretion. Appellant's second point of error is overruled. Wow. I mean, I think this is like normal, right? In death penalty case where they exhaust like everything. I'd be curious how Wade acted while this is going on because in the doc he felt so emotionally removed from me telling. Makes me curious if he was there the whole time or just distant from it. I find it suspicious. Hey Edith, I can't believe he didn't know the guy is dumb and has a personality of a thumb. Good morning, Jacinta. Yeah, I know. Hmm. Recently, he did a TikTok live and he sounded the same. Really? But I wouldn't be talking to him. I wouldn't be on TikTok live, talking about this if he has a lawsuit going on. Point of error, due process clause. The Sixth Amendment secures to criminal defendants the right to trial by an impartial jury. Mm, Radio versus Louisiana, the Supreme Court of the United States addressed a due process challenge to the denial of a motion for change of venue. After Ridu's arrest, a moving picture film with a soundtrack was made of an interview in the jail between Ridu and the sheriff of Calcasieu Parish. This 20-minute interview, which consisted of interrogation by the sheriff, was admissions by Ridu that he had perpetrated the bank robbery, kidnapping, and unaliving, was broadcast over a television station in Lake Charles, and some 24,000 people in the community saw and heard it on television. The trial court denied his motion of change for venue, and the Supreme Court of Louisiana affirmed it. The Supreme Court of the United States reversed that. The Supreme Court explained what the people in the community saw on their television was him in jail, flanked by the sheriff and two state troopers, admitting in detail the commission of the robbery, kidnapping, and unaliving. In response to leading questions by the sheriff, to the tens of thousands of people who saw and heard it in very real sense was reduced trial at which he pleaded guilty. Consequently, the kangaroo court proceedings that followed violated due process. Similarly, in Estes versus Texas, pretrial publicity in effect caused a bombardment for the community with the sights and sounds of two-day hearing during which the original jury panel, the petitioner, the lawyers, and the judge was highly publicized. This excessive report led to considerable disruption and denied Estes the judicial serenity and calm to which was entitled. In the Supreme Court's view, the carnival atmosphere was sufficient to upset due process. The parties analyzed this case under 4 factors relevant to presuming prejudice. Size of the community. As we recognize in Tracy, there are approximately 100,000 residents in Bowie County. This population size is similar to that of Rideau, in which the population of approximately 150,000 people. But the key difference between this and that case is the breadth of dissemination of the media. In the Rideau case, the 3 broadcasts reached 24,000, 53,000, and 20,000 people. A similar level of dissemination is not in the record here. Consequently, even though the size of the community in Taylor's case is similar to that of Rideau, this factor weighs against a finding of presumed juror prejudice. Nature of the publicity. The appellant, Taylor, relies on 2 separate articles by the Texarkana Gazette and TXK Today. That includes references to Taylor allegedly confessing to law enforcement to argue that the pretrial publicity in her case concluded evidence of smoking gun variety that would have invited prejudgment of her culpability. Appellant further argues that the community commentary on Facebook revealed a widespread animosity in Bowie County. We disagree. First, widespread publicity itself is not considered inherently prejudicial. This is wild. This one is a messed up situation. I know. It's so disturbing. I'm so glad this got denied. Appellant does not challenge the accuracy of the news articles. As this court has held, news stories that are accurate and objective in their coverage are generally considered by this court not to be prejudicial or inflammatory. Second, as we also recognized in the Tracy testimony, it showed that many of the people commenting, posting, and responding to articles were not even Bowie County residents and would not be in the jury pool. Third, while appellant highlights individual inflammatory comments on Facebook posts, as was admitted in evidence, there was more non-prejudicial comments and posts, and as appellant's expert conceded, he did not investigate the actual identities of any of the individuals commenting or posting on social media websites. For the reasons stated above, the mere fact that each newspaper ran articles or that certain individuals commented or posted on Facebook does not correlate to widespread dissemination in Bowie County. Appellant argues that the combined Facebook following, each of the newspaper accounts for approximately 135 of the county's population, but there is no record evidence, unlike in Rideau, to support the assertion that even a portion of that viewership read the articles. The same is likewise true to the extent appellant relies on Facebook or other social media sources. There is no evidence in the record that those sources were pervasively shared to the same level as Redu. This factor weighs against a finding of presumed juror prejudice. Time between media attention and trial. Taylor argues that the gap between the offense and the appellant's trial, a gap of less than 2 years, is not similar to the 4-year gaps that we recognized in Redu. In Patton versus Yount, as sufficient to diminish the effect of pretrial publicity, but a period of nearly 2 years has been recognized by other courts as sufficient to allow the disciple level of publicity about the crime themselves to drop and community passions to diminish. Hmm. Conversely, McQueen testified at the change of venue hearing that most cases do not have anywhere near the coverage that this case received during that 2-year period. In light of all the evidence in the record, this factor is neutral as to presuming juror prejudice. Does a jury's decision indicate bias? In Redu, Estates, and Shepard, the jury's verdict did not undermine in any way the supposition of juror bias. The defendants in those cases were still convicted. In Skilling, by contrast, the jury acquitted of Skilling of 9 insider training counts. The Supreme Court that it would be odd for an appellant to presume prejudice in the case in which the juror's action run counter to that presumption. Appellant's jury convicted her of the charged offense and sentenced her to death. Consistent with those other cases, this factor weighs in favor of presuming juror prejudice. We conclude that Skilling factors weigh against a presumption of juror prejudice. While appellant's jury did convict her of capital murder, this case does not bear the same hallmarks as Skilling, Estes, or Shepard, where the Supreme Court recognized extensive and prejudicial pretrial publicity. The record shows that the appellant's trial did not suffer from the grossly brutal kangaroo court proceedings that infected the trials in those other cases. Appellant's third point of error is overruled. In the fourth through sixth points of error, appellant challenges the trial court's denial of her pretrial motion for continuance. Specifically, appellant argues that the trial court's denial for her motion for continuance violated her right to counsel under the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution and Article of the Texas Constitution, and her right to due process under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and the Texas Constitution, and her rights under Article 29.03 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. We overrule each point of error. All motions for continuance must be sworn to by a person having personal knowledge of the facts relied on for the continuance. We have construed these statutes to require a sworn written motion to preserve appellate review from a trial judge's denial of a motion for continuance. Pre-trial, appellant filed a written motion for continuance, but the motion was not sworn to by the appellant in either a verification or an affidavit. Instead, appellant relies on 4 ex parte affidavits from witnesses that appellant attached to her motion for continuance filed in the trial court. None of these ex parte affidavits were included in the appellate briefing. To the extent that the appellant asserts the ex parte affidavits are sufficient to preserve error, appellant has inadequately briefed the argument. Appellant conclusory asserts these declarations from a mitigation specialist, 2 experts, and an investigator satisfy Article 29.08. At no point does appellant explain why her unsworn motion with sworn affidavit satisfies Articles 29.08. She simply asserts that it does. Resolving this preservation of error issue in appellant's favor would therefore require us to make appellant's argument for her. This we will not do. We overrule her appellant's 6 points of error. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you, Neat Noodle. It's still odd that he never saw her belly or anything like that. Yeah, he said, is this the same Ann Taylor as Oh, I didn't even pay attention to that, S dubs. Interesting. This is odd that he never saw her belly or anything like that. I know, and he even said it. He was like, I haven't seen her naked in 10 months." In 10 months, that's a stretch, right? Like, a whole month over this extraneous offenses. I have another document I wanna read about this, but I guess they go into it here, so let's read it. I should check what date that other document is. In her 7th through 11th points of error, appellant challenges the admissions of extraneous offense evidence during her trial. In her 7th point of error, appellant contends that the trial court erred in admitting extraneous offense evidence without reasonable notice. Mhm. In her 8th point of error, appellant argues that the extraneous offense evidence was inadmissible under Rules 404B and that the admission of evidence affected her substantial rights. In her ninth point of error, Taylor claims that the introduction of evidence unrelated to Article 37.071 special issues during the penalty phase of trial affected her substantial rights. In her 10th point of error, appellant argues that the introduction of excessive extraneous offense testimony violated her right for a fair trial. And in her 11th point of error, appellant contends that the introduction of evidence invoking gender stereotypes violated due process. We overrule each point of error. Rule 404B states that the prosecutor must provide reasonable notice before trial that the prosecution intends to introduce such evidence, rather than that arising in the same transaction. In its case in chief, the spirit of Rule 404B is to allow a defendant adequately to prepare to defend against the extraneous offense evidence. We have emphasized that the purpose of Rule 404B is to prevent surprise. Assuming without deciding that error was preserved, we conclude that there was no error. The state's first notice of intent to use extraneous offenses was over 100 pages in length and was served 3 months prior to the start of trial. The state's three supplemental notices of intent to use the extraneous offenses likewise lengthily described additional extraneous acts that occurred during appellant's pretrial incarceration and were served between 1 to 2 months prior to trial. Tellingly, appellant's trial counsel did not argue surprise when the trial court granted him a running objection under Rule 404B. The record in this case tends to support that the conclusion that the defense did indeed have actual notice of the state's intents to introduce extraneous offenses, and hence the trial court's decision to admit the evidence is supported by the record and must be upheld. So let me pull up this other document. So it says, first supplemental to defendant extraneous offenses, bad acts, and other wrongs that the state intends to use. Okay, so it's like all her behavior in jail. I'm not a lawyer, so for those in the comments being like, grasping at anything. Yeah, I know. Let's look that up. I want the actual definition. Oh yeah. Any acts of misconduct, wrongs or crimes committed by a defendant that are not included in the charging instrument. These acts do not need to result in a conviction to be considered, but they are generally treated differently depending on the phase of the trial. Hmm. This case is insane. Yeah. Rule evidence 404B provides the evidence of crime, wrong, or other act is not admissible to prove a person's character in order to show that on a particular occasion the person acted in accordance with the character. However, this evidence may be admissible for another purpose, such as proving motive, opportunity, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, identity, absence of mistake, or lack of accident. Rule 404B is a rule of inclusion rather than exclusion. The rule excludes only that evidence that is offered or will be used solely for the purpose of proving bad character and hence conduct in conformity with that bad character. Mm. The admissibility of evidence is within the discretion of the trial court and will not be overturned absent an abuse of discretion. That is to say, as long as the trial court's ruling was within the zone of reasonable disagreement, the appellate court should affirm. A trial court's ruling will generally be upheld if the evidence shows that one, an extraneous transaction is relevant to a material non propensity issue, and two, the probative value of that evidence is not substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of issues, or misleading the jury. In her briefing, Taylor challenges four pieces of admitted extraneous offense evidence. One, evidence that the appellant asked witnesses to be surrogates for six-figure compensation. She didn't want that to go into the trial. Two, evidence that the appellant claimed to be the heiress to a syrup fortune and entered contracts to buy large amounts of land. Three, evidence that appellant is normal, has no mental health issues, and simply chooses to lie when she wants to. Okay, so she doesn't want that in. Does that mean you do have mental health issues? I'm curious about that too. Not that that excuses anything, but hi, lovies. Thank you for being here. Please hit the like button. I know we've been going through it with the Kenzie case, but we'll be back to that later tonight and tomorrow. Members only. So shout out to all the members. Thank you for being here. Just getting here and getting off work late. Okay, yes, get caught up. Because clearly she's a psychopath. Four, evidence of a particularly strange tale supposedly spun about her mother hiring the Mexican mafia to kill her. We address each in turn. Ooh, this is good. At trial, the state introduced evidence from Abby and Michaela, who both testified that Taylor asked them to be surrogates in exchange for money. The trial court could have reasonably concluded that this evidence was admissible as evidence of the appellant's motive and intent. The evidence at trial showed that the appellant underwent a hysterectomy that was authorized by her then husband, I believe it was Tommy, due to medical complications during an ectopic pregnancy. After she divorced Tommy and married Parker, she was unable to get pregnant and sought surrogates because she wanted more children. That appellant could not get pregnant and needed surrogates was relevant to appellant's fake pregnancy and efforts to keep her and Wade together in a relationship. It was within the zone of reasonable disagreement from the trial court to conclude that the surrogacy evidence was admissible for the permissible purpose of establishing her motive and intent for unaliving Reagan and kidnapping Braxton. The Harris to a syrup fortune. The state introduced evidence from Rusty, a real estate broker with Century 21 in Paris, Texas. I don't know why I said it like that. Texas. Lowe testified that in December of 2019, a woman identifying herself as Taylor Parker or Taylor Griffin called him inquiring about a 1,500-acre tract of land on the right edge of Bowie County, valued at approximately $4.7 million. Lowe testified that when he asked Taylor how she was going to pay for the property, she responded that she was the heir to a syrup company. The trial court could have reasonably concluded that this evidence was admissible as evidence of the appellant's motive. After having been rejected by the men in her life, the state sought to prove that Taylor did not want to lose her newest boyfriend, Wade, whom she began dating after her 2019 divorce from Hunter. These efforts to keep Wade culminated in a faked pregnancy that eventually led to the deaths of Reagan and Braxton. It was within the zone of reasonable disagreement for the trial court to conclude the evidence of appellant lying about her status as heir to a syrup company fit within her scheme to keep Wade, and consequently was evidence of her eventual motive to unalive Reagan and the baby. First of all, who would even believe that without proof? Like, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Like, isn't that weird? Oh, she forged some documents too. At trial, the state called Angela, whose husband is a distant relevant Relative of Wade's. Oh, jeez. I don't think it was about wanting the baby. She wanted the fantasy she was living in. Mm, I thought you could adopt a baby or something. I know that's hard sometimes, but I don't know why she had to do what she did. At the trial, the state called Angela, whose husband is a distant relative of Wade's. Angela spent a lot of time with Taylor, and Taylor told Angela stories about her life. One such story involved Taylor's mother, Pryor, who didn't like Wade. Huh. According to appellant, Pryor hired the Mexican mafia to unalive Taylor. Contextually, Taylor created the story immediately after she and Griffin got in a tiff at a party and stayed separate for a few days. Angela testified that Wade, as he was listening to appellant, felt he couldn't leave her with all this going on with her mother. And so they were back together after that. Oh, okay, Wade. Well, there's a problem because we're already broken up. You should have kept it that way. The trial court could have reasonably concluded that this evidence was admissible as evidence of the appellant's motive. As with the other extraneous offense evidence, this story again exhibited the lengths to which Taylor went to keep Wade in their relationship. I don't even think about about Wade. Like Hoodie said, it was all her and the baby and the life. But I mean, come on now. Yeah, she didn't bother to take care of her own children. Hmm. That's sad. It was within the zone of reasonable disagreement for the trial to conclude that the evidence that the Taylor lied about her mother taking a hit out on her with the Mexican mafia fit within her scheme to keep Griffin and was evidence of her eventual motive to unalive Reagan and Braxton. Appellate lies when she wants and was quote unquote normal. At trial, the state introduced testimony from Deanna, Parker's mother, and Bobby Jordan, the interim police chief for the city of Texarkana. Is that how you say it? On direct examination by the state, Deanna testified. Question. So she knows when she's lying? Absolutely. Yes, she does. Jordan testified. Question. Did she seem normal? That's a word they've been using. Did it seem pretty normal to you? Response is she seemed normal. Rule of appellate procedure provides that an appellate court must disregard a non-constitutional error that does not affect a criminal's defendant's substantial rights. Under that rule, an appellate court may not reverse for non-constitutional error if the court, after examining the record as a whole, has fair assurance that the error did not have a substantial and injurious effect or influence in determining the jury's verdict. Jordan's testimony that the appellant was normal had no effect on the outcome of the trial. Indiana Parker's testimony that the appellant knows when she is lying was cumulative of numerous other instances of evidence that was presented to the jury that showed appellant lying. There was ample evidence substantiating Taylor's guilt regarding her commission of the unalivings. After examining the record as a whole, we have more than a fair assurance that the admission of both lines of questioning did not have a substantial and injurious effect on the jury's verdict. Having reviewed the evidence that appellant challenges in her briefing, we conclude that there was no trial court error or that presuming error, we have more than a fair assurance that the error did not have substantial and injurious effect on the verdict. Appellant's eighth point of error is overruled. The admissibility of extraneous offense evidence offered at punishment is governed by Code of Criminal Procedure. This article has been it says article 370.71. This article has been construed to afford the trial judge wide latitude in admitting or excluding evidence of extraneous offenses at the punishment stage of a capital trial. The trial court's determination of admissibility is evaluated for abuse of discretion. In her briefing, Taylor contends that four pieces of extraneous offense evidence that were admitted during punishment were in no way relevant to the future danger special issue. First, appellant challenges the admission of evidence that the appellant sold a former coworker some bread for appellant's kids' school fundraiser but failed to deliver the bread. At punishment, the state introduced evidence from Nona, appellant's former coworker at Genesis Prime Care. Nona testified that she purchased $14 of bread from appellant through the fundraiser, but after appellant was terminated from her job, appellant never delivered her the bread or returned the money. It was within the zone of reasonable disagreement for the trial judge to conclude that evidence that appellant committed theft was relevant to the future dangerousness special issue. What the heck? Next, appellant challenges evidence that she claimed to be an heiress of the Morton salt fortune. At trial, the state elicited testimony from Melissa, appellant's former supervisor, who testified about appellant's history of untruthfulness. Appellant's claim to Mason was that appellant was an heiress of the Morton salt fortune, a lie about her family background told to an employer who arguably related to the future dangerousness special issue because it fit within the state's theory at trial that Taylor had a propensity for not telling the truth due to her psychopathic traits. Yeah, that's exactly what she is. I'm glad I'm seeing that word here. Super strange that her mom didn't come forth to wade with all of the lies. What about Tommy? Was he in the documentary? I wonder, like, did he reach out to Wade? Like, this is one of the craziest and saddest cases. It's up there. Oh my goodness. This is wild. Psychopathic traits. Yeah. That appellant had a propensity to claim things to manipulate regarding finances to her benefit was linked to those traits. I'm curious if they did an evaluation on her. Like, I'm sure, right? That happens before, or at what point does that happen during the death penalty phase? I'm sure, right? They already probably ruled that out. Lastly, appellant challenges evidence that Taylor once cursed at her grandmother as a teenager, and evidence that she asked for a bigger desk at work. As before, the admission of evidence is reviewed for harmless error under rule of appellate procedure. The gruesome nature of the crime and the state's additional punishment phase evidence provided ample evidence to support the jury's answers to the special punishment issues. After examining the record of the appellant's trial as a whole, we conclude that these passing references did not have a substantial and injurious effect or influence on the jury's verdict at the punishment phase. Having reviewed the challenged evidence in Taylor's briefing, we conclude that there was either no trial court error or that, presuming error, we have more than a fair assurance that the error did not have a substantial and injurious effect on the jury's verdict. Appellant's 9 points of error is overruled. Excessive extraneous offense testimony. I can't wait to read that article because it's going to have probably a lot more information about these offenses. I don't think either of her exes from before Wade were in the dock. She also lied to her previous boss about losing a child. Really? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that in the documentary. Oh, wait. Because didn't she lie about having like health conditions too? Wasn't it cancer and MS? Disgusting. What a disgusting human. My husband thinks they need to do a case study on this chick after her death. Yeah. And thank you, Nicole Buckhart, for becoming a new member. I appreciate you. Thank you. Yes, MS and cancer. Okay, that's gross. Appellant's 10th point of error claims that introduction of excessive extraneous offense evidence violated her right to a fair trial. But instead of putting this court to a specific objection at trial regarding excessiveness or case law from this court recognizing that excessiveness is a bar to the admissibility of of Rule 404 evidence. Appellant instead argues that the circumstance of an extraneous offense evidence from inadequate notice to introduction of impermissible character evidence in the guilt phase to admission of evidence irrelevant to the special issues and penalty phase violated her right to a fair trial. To preserve her error, a party must let the trial judge know what he wants as well as giving reason for being entitled to relief. Taylor never objected to the trial court on the basis of excessiveness. Consequently, error was not preserved for appellate review. Alternatively, if we take appellant's arguments at face value, having already overruled points of error 7 through 9, appellant's challenge to the circumstances of extraneous offense evidence and her 10th point of error is without merit. That is overruled. Gender stereotypes. I was wondering about this. And her 11th point of error, appellant argues that the introduction of evidence invoking gender stereotypes violated due process. But appellant failed to object on the basis in the trial court, so error was not preserved. There were no objections at trial to any evidence on the basis that the evidence invoked gender stereotypes in violation of due process. Consequently, appellant did not preserve any error for the appellate review. I don't get it. Gender stereotypes? Meaning like what? Appellant's 11th point of error is overruled. Invoked gender stereotypes? Okay. Wade said that he would be there in the front row at her death day. Really? Oh. Okay, Wade, settle down, sir, because we have some questions for you, Mr. Wade. Get your ass on over here. Okay, wait, hold on. Let me Google this real quick. Somebody was like, don't use Google when we were looking up like Kenzie's possible mental health issues. Because she's a woman, I don't get it. Let's look it up. When a legal proceeding relies on gender stereotypes, such as assumptions about how men and women or non-binary individuals should behave. Oh, it can be challenged as a violation of due process. Would this be something that could be argued in Kenzie's case too? Courts evaluate these claims through the lens of constitutional equality. Okay. She'd be in front with her family. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was overruled. Admission of other evidence. In her 12th through 18th points of error, appellant contends the trial court erred by admitting various pieces of evidence. Specifically, appellant challenges the admission of one, a recorded 911 call made by Reagan's mother, Jessica. Interesting. Two, 28 crime scene photographs. I haven't seen those. I don't think those are released. This is wild. A video of Reagan's body, 62 photographs of Reagan's autopsy, 3 photographs of Broxland's autopsy, and 2 additional photographs of the deceased infant. Appellant also contends that the cumulative effect of the errors affected her substantial rights in both guilt and punishment phases of her trial. We overrule each of appellant's points of error. Listen, I don't know, Taylor, why you just don't shut up. Because honestly, like, what is even her defense here to everything she did? Remember? She strangled Reagan, stabs her 100 and what was it, 13 times with a hammer, beats her with the hammer, and then cuts her baby out of her womb. I mean, unless she was literally like a psychopath. They only show blood in the documentary, not her body. And her 12th point of error. Oh, so this is the admissibility of the 911 call. This will be interesting. In her 12th point of error, appellant contends the trial court admitted a recorded 911 call made by the decedent's mother, Jessica, that served no purpose beyond demonstrating her devastation at the loss of her daughter and unborn daughter. Appellant further asserts that the probative value of the 911 call was outweighed by its prejudicial effect. We already rejected a similar challenge in Estrada versus State. Wait, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it her mom that found her body though? Um, why wouldn't she call 911? It was the mom and like a friend, right? It was straight savage. I wonder if I could find that 911 call real quick. I'd like to listen to that. 911 call. Wait, trying to say Reagan's yes. She's trying to say that it was basically like emotional, right? That's ridiculous. It demonstrates nothing except her devastation. Well, no shit, Sherlock. No shit. Excuse my language. Um, in appellant's case, like in Estrada, Brooks discovers Reagan's body and reported the crime. Yeah. What the heck? She's allowed to do that. Someone said she didn't show to her. Her mom called, then contacted her own husband, who came with his friend after her mom found Reagan. That's understandable as long as she called them first, which she did. I know. How ridiculous is that? Discovered Reagan's body. Okay. Consequently, her recorded 911 call was admissible to provide a framework within which the particulars of the state's evidence could be developed. Of course, it's overruled. Yeah. Admissibility of the photographs. As with other admissibility decisions, we review a trial court's decision to admit or exclude photographic evidence for abuse of its discretion. A photograph is generally admissible if verbal testimony about the matters depicted in the photograph is also admissible. Nice. Crime scene photographs. Rule of Evidence 403 provides that a trial court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of unfair prejudice. In her 13th point of error, appellant argues that the trial court erred in admitting 28 of 137 crime scene photographs, which were substantially more prejudicial than probative in the violation of Rule 403. States Exhibits 236 through 38, 240, 242, and 244 offer a wide view panoramic shots of the crime scene from different angles. States Exhibits 298 through 300 depict various pieces of furniture around the crime scene, as well as the spread of blood and footprints. There's bloody footprints and there was, like, handprints too, right, on the walls and stuff? She fought for her and her baby, man. States Exhibits 298 and 299 specifically depict a pillow and towels covered in blood. And States Exhibit 355 through 374 depict the injuries inflicted on Reagan's body, as well as the spread of blood around her body. As we have previously recognized, the photographs in question were probative of the crime scene and the injuries received by the victim were necessary for the state in developing its case, and because they were not overly gruesome, the photographs did not pose the potential of impressing the juror in some irrational way. Furthermore, the gruesomeness of the crime that merely reflects the actions of the defendant is not sufficient reason for excluding the evidence. Consequently, the trial court's decision to admit the crime scene photographs was within the zone of reasonable disagreement and was not an abuse of discretion. That was overruled. Autopsy photographs. Appellant argues that the trial court admitted a lengthy series of photographs that focused on the autopsy process rather than the injuries inflicted during the offense. Autopsy photographs are generally admissible unless they depict mutilation of the victim caused by the autopsy itself. Changes rendered by the autopsy process are minor significance if the disturbing nature of the photograph is primarily due to the injuries caused by the appellant. The challenged exhibit in appellant's 16th point of error depict the full extent of Reagan's fatal injuries, including stab wounds and incisions to her face and neck, evidence of possible strangulation, and blunt force skull fractures. That some photographs depict the autopsy process is a little of import. These changes were necessary to show the jury the full scope of the internal injuries that Reagan suffered from the appellant's assault. This evidence is highly probative of the appellant's mental state at the time she committed the crime, which in turn is relevant to the future dangerousness special issue. Likewise, the challenged exhibits in appellant's 17th point of error depict the injuries that Braxlin suffered, including evidence of focal subscapular hemorrhage. Oh, mm, let me look that up really quick. Localized collection of blood trapped between an organ's outer capsule and its underlying issue. While this term can occasionally describe bleeding in the eye or brain, it most commonly applies to the liver or the kidneys. Hmm. Okay. The medical examiner testified that this type of injury could be consistent with the infant's mother being hit in the stomach while the infant was still in utero. Shh. Wow. Taylor's just a monster. Furthermore, the photographs depict evidence of hemorrhaging involving the umbilical cord, which could also potentially be caused by some sort of blunt trauma. Like the evidence in the appellant's 16th point of error, this evidence is highly probative of the appellant's state of mind at the time she committed the crime, which in turn is relevant to the future dangerousness special issue. Consequently, the trial court's decision to admit the autopsy photograph was within zone of reasonable disagreement and was not an abuse of discretion. We overrule that point. Additional photographs of Braxlin. In her 18th point of error, the appellant contends the trial court abused its discretion by admitting two photos of Braxlin after she was recovered by paramedics and transported to the hospital. The photographs depicted the as is state that Braxlin was in immediately after the appellant's crude C section and prior to her later autopsy. The trial court could have reasonably concluded the photographs were relevant to offer the jury a comprehensive view of Braxlin's condition and to assist in its determination that Braxlin was born and is alive at the time she was kidnapped. As with the autopsy photographs, the trial court could have reasonably concluded that the additional photographs of Braxlin were probative of appellant's mental state at the time of committing the crime, which in turn is relevant to the future dangerousness special issue. Consequently, the trial court's decision to admit the two photographs of Braxlin at the hospital was within zone of reasonable disagreement. That's overruled. Admissibility of the video. In her 14 and 50 points of error, appellant argues that the trial court abused its discretion by admitting a graphic video of the decedent's body at the crime scene. Specifically, appellant argues the trial court erred in rule of evidence 401 by admitting the video. She just like didn't want anything to be considered. Like, Taylor, you got no chance, girl. No chance. Hey, Shug. Not the best case. Oh, because you mean it's so brutal or why? Similar to what they're claiming in Montgomery's appeal, claiming the focus on XYZ created clouded emotional judgment by the jury. Maybe don't do the crime if you don't want people to see the evidence. Exactly, hoodies. Exactly. That's actually very oh, I see. So happy you're live while I wait for my oh, okay, Shug. I saw your previous comment. Well, congratulations to you, but yeah, I know. I'm glad that you're with your first grandbaby, though. Congrats. That's so cute. I think one of the detectives said it was one of the worst scenes he's ever been to. Facing the DP, I guess they were gonna try everything. I'm glad it didn't work. Yeah, no, she gets no chance. In appellant's case, the video evidence in State's Exhibit 250 was the only evidence that provided a live panoramic view of the crime scene, including a live visual of the footprints found around Reagan's body. Furthermore, the video evidence offered a more comprehensive view of Reagan's injuries and how they looked immediately following the unaliving and prior to law enforcement's investigation. We conclude that the video evidence was relevant and probative. While we acknowledge that the video depicts a gruesome crime scene, the videotape simply reflects the gruesomeness of the crime, and that is not sufficient reason for excluding the evidence. The trial court's decision to admit the video evidence was within the zone of reasonable disagreement. Cumulative harm. Though it is possible for a number of errors to cumulatively rise to the point where they become harmful, we have never found that the non errors may be in their cumulative effect cause error. Having found no error in the appellant's 12 through 18 points of error, we cannot conclude that there is a cumulative effect of harm. Prosecutor statements. In her 19 through 23rd points of error, appellant challenges comments made by the prosecutor throughout her trial, as well as testimony elicited by the state through witnesses. Specifically, appellant alleges that the trial court erred by allowing prosecutors to call appellant's case the worst. Two, the trial court erred by allowing the state to elicit testimony from witnesses that this case was the worst. The trial court erred by allowing the state to refer to appellant using derogatory names. And four, prosecutors committed misconduct by inserting personal knowledge and opinions into appellant's trial. Appellant also contends that cumulative effect of the errors affected her substantial rights in both guilt and punishment phases of her trial. We overrule each of the appellant's point of error. Who called her derogatory names? You deserve it. Okay, preservation. Pretrial. Appellant's trial counsel made an oral motion in limine, requesting that the state prohibited as well any potential witnesses from testifying that this is the worst case I've ever seen or anything along those lines, as well as no mention from the state or any witness offering an opinion that the defendant has shown no remorse or that there's a lack of remorse on a couple of grounds. Additionally, appellant's trial counsel filed a pretrial written motion in limine requesting, we're going to say in lemonade. We're cute. We're all cute. We're going to talk about how we're all so cute later. Um, I think evil is putting it lightly. This case, yeah. What do we call this? Yeah, we saw conspiracy. We're going to be talking about it later. Thank you, Peaches, for being here. Peach on a leash. Um, I want to look up what happens after this. Does she get put like how long until she gets, you know, put down, if you may? Okay, so where was I? A motion in lemonade, however, is a preliminary matter and normally preserves nothing for appellate review. For error to be preserved with regard to the subject of a motion in lemonade, an objection must be made at the time the subject is raised during trial. The record is devoid of any contemporaneous objections during each of the challenge comments by either the prosecutor or a witness. Appellant has failed to preserve her complaints for appellate review. Nice. Appellant relies on Draughton versus State to argue that her pretrial motions in lemonade were not true motions in lemonade. In Draughton versus State, the appellant filed a pretrial motion in lemonade that sought to prevent the state from questioning prospective jurors concerning their attitudes about the DP. We concluded that the motion in lemonade was not a true motion in lemonade because it did not constitute a request that the admissibility of evidence or disposition of other matter by the court be determined outside the jury's presence. Rather, the motion was sufficient to appraise the trial judge of his complaint and that the judge's adverse ruling upon it was authoritative enough to obviate the necessity for further objection. The same is not true here. Unlike the motions in Drotton and Gooter, appellant's pretrial motions in Lemonade were speculative and did not go to one specific witness or even one definitive category of testimony. Rather, they sought to exclude broad swaths of jury argument or evidence. Without a specific, timely objection to a jury argument or testimony, it would be impossible for the trial court to know whether such argument or evidence fell within the ambit of appellant's pretrial motions in Lemonade. Moreover, one of these bases for the appellant's pretrial motions in Lemonade, Rule Evidence 403 shows why a contemporaneous objection was necessary. Rule 403 requires the trial court to balance the probative value of the evidence to see if the probative value is substantially outweighed by one of several enumerated risks. A trial court cannot make that determination pretrial, speculating as to what evidence will eventually be introduced and admitted without having the full scope of the evidence before it. We are unpersuaded by appellant's arguments and conclude that appellant's objections were not preserved for appellate review. We overrule appellant's point of errors. Personal knowledge or opinions. The proper method of preserving error in cases of prosecutorial misconduct is to 1, object on specific grounds, 2, request an instruction that the jury disregard the comment, and 3, move for mistrial. In her briefing, appellant cites numerous allegedly objectionable questions asked by the state to witnesses, but appellant only cites 6 times a contemporaneous objection was lodged. As to some questions appellant objected, did not receive a ruling, and failed to object to the trial court's refusal to rule. As to other objections, appellant failed to request an instruction that the jury disregard the comment after her objections were abstained. And as to one objection, appellant failed to move for mistrial after the court granted for a limiting instruction. Cumulative error. Appellant claims that the cumulative error in her 19th, 22nd, and 23rd points of error harmed her substantial rights during the guilt and penalty phases of trial. Having found no preserved error as to appellant's 19th, 22nd, and 23rd points, we cannot conclude that there's cumulative harm. In her 24th and 25th points of error, appellant contends that the trial court erred by permitting the state's penalty phase rebuttal experts to conduct unlimited interviews and permitting the state's penalty phase expert to testify beyond the scope of the appellant's limited waiver of her right against self-incrimination. We overrule both points. In her 24th point, appellant specifically argues that the trial court erred by allowing the state's penalty phase rebuttal experts to conduct standardized psychological assessments, particularly to psychopathy. Wait, so they did do a psychological assessment? I'm sure they do, right? When you get convicted of the death penalty? No, I need to look into like the process of the death penalty. We shall learn together. What was I asking? Oh, is a psych I think that's like, isn't it mandatory? Maybe not. I'm not a lawyer. No, it's not automatically mandatory in Texas simply because a defendant is facing the death penalty. However, it is routinely used in specific circumstances. Assessing a defendant's competency to stand trial. Yeah, she would have had at least one psych. They always do an evaluation. Wow. So she's just plain old evil. The defendant breaks his silence to speak his own psychiatric expert and introduce a testimony which is based on such interview. He has constructively taken the stand and waived his Fifth Amendment right to refuse to submit the state's psychiatric experts. The trial court may compel an examination of the appellant by an expert of the state or court's choosing, and the state may present rebuttal testimony of the expert based upon his examination of the defendant. Our opinion in Davis is directly on point. There, as here, the appellant sought to challenge the scope of the Legron examination. The same is true in the appellant's case. The subject matter of appellant's experts, organic physical defects in her brain, personality disorders, and childhood trauma are factors that could be taken into account in determining future dangerousness. Okay. Could this be well, you know what? I won't bring up that case right now, but interesting. Um, Dr. Edward Grippen, one of the appellant's expert, testified that Taylor's personality was not characterized by criminal violence and that given her background, there was no strong basis to predict a probability that the appellant would pose a future danger. As we did in Davis, we declined to draw a hair splitting distinction between these topics and the state's experts' ultimate opinion as to future dangerousness. This point is overruled. In her 25th point, appellant argues that the trial court erred by permitting Dr. Timothy Proctor, one of the state's rebuttal experts, to testify about the results of the PCLR psychopathy checklist. He administered to appellant, including appellant's above average score and appellant's purported traits and potential full psychopathy. The state's rebuttal testimony is limited to the issues raised by the defense expert. Evidence. At trial, the appellant introduced testimony from three experts: Dr. Siddhartha Nadarkarni, a neurologist, Dr. Edward G., a psychiatrist, and Laura, a licensed master social worker. Dr. Nadarkarni, sorry if I'm saying any of this wrong, testified that the appellant has atrophy in the frontal and temporal areas of her brain. This is what I wanted to hear about. Her freaking brain has atrophy in the frontal and temporal areas. He testified. Question. In her case, would it likely be because of early interference with her development? Doctor says, that would be my speculation, but it would be hard to know, but that's from what this imaging looks like and how long her history is. That would be my position. Wait, so there was something wrong in her brain? Let me look that up. Frontal and temporal atrophy means the parts of the brain behind your forehead and on the sides near your ears are shrinking of losing nerve cells. These areas control your personality, behavior, emotions, language, and memory. Wow. Let me see what you guys are saying. I know, anytime we hear Proctor. Because of her mental state, she would have had at least one. Just one. In my opinion, she has borderline personality disorder and knew what she was doing was wrong and did it anyways. Over half of us would show something weird on an MRI. Yeah. Don't look at my brain. Please do not. Actually, I should probably look into my brain. Okay, let's move on. Question. I think you described it as something that had been going on for a long time. Answer. That I can definitely say right. I just can't say if it's developmental, like in utero or not, but it has been going on for a long time. Oh, wow. And the dysfunction affects the way Taylor behaves? 100% yes. So there was something. Your brain is cute. Conspiracy, that's funny. That is so funny. Thank you for that. There has to be, she started the weirdness in her younger years. Interesting. Based on her analysis of appellant's MRI slides, doctor concluded, question. So we're almost done with this too. Thanks you guys for hanging out. Please make sure you guys hit the like button. This abnormality affects how a person processes information from receiving it and then acting on it. Answer. That's right. That's the main place where that happens. Question. From what you know about the case, do you find that Taylor has acted dysfunctionally as far as neurology or her brain is concerned? Yes. She has what we would call frontal lobe syndrome. I mean, a lot of features of the frontal lobal dysfunction. Oh, wow. And it's actually an organic physical defect in her brain? Correct. The doctor also described disinhibition, impulsivity, and confabulation. Oh, wow. So, yeah, okay, there's something there. Um, Confabulation is a psychological memory error where a person unconsciously fills gaps in their memory with fabricated. Okay, that is like on par with what I think would be wrong with her. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. She fills those gaps with lies and these stories. Or maybe the idea of her wanting like a family or something. I don't know. I'm curious about some of her history and past, I guess. Um, Making up stories or being consistent testified that the appellant suffered from both conditions as a result of her mental atrophy. The doctor opined that these conditions can be mitigated through medications, psychotherapy, group therapy, or supervision. When discussing the potential success of treatment for a patient like Taylor, the doctor testified, question, how would you help one hypothetically? Doctor says, like I was saying before, usually these patients need very intensive treatment. Psychopharmacology, which is medication, can be helpful. Individual psychotherapy can be helpful. Usually, they need a comprehensive program like a cognitive remediation program, and often they need supervision. I know a lot of you will probably lose yo shite in the chat, but like, could this be what's wrong with Kenzie too, or no? Oh my God, don't come for me. I should never said that. I'm guessing that this is pay to play evaluator. I don't think an evaluation done by the prosecutor would agree. Okay, neat noodle. Our brains are cute. We're geniuses. Cynthia. Cute brains. She's a pathological liar, yet she's more sick. Yeah. This is crazy. Question. Something like they would have in a prison? Answer. Supervision for sure. Yes, correct. Wait, supervision is different than actually like getting help though. Like, right? Unless it's like I guess by a therapist at all times, but possible therapeutic resources, also psychiatric resources and things like that. Doctor says yes. Question. And they could manage somewhat in a setting like that? He says yes. Okay. This is just one doctor's opinion, too. Let's keep that in mind. On cross examination, Dr. Nadkarni testified. Question. You can't rely on anything she says, can you? Because she's a pathological liar. The doctor says, I think you have to take with a grain of salt anything she says. That's right. She is a pathological liar. And this tells me there needs to be a consideration of where to house her state mental. You know what? Bring the state mental hospitals back, like full blown. That's what this world needs. This should not be used as an excuse. No, but I agree, hoodies. Like there's like mental health stuff here, you know? He said that's exactly what I said in the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. We know how hard, mental health treatment is. And can you really get good treatment in a prison or jail? I don't think so, but I could be wrong. I don't know. And later, when discussing the facts of appellant's crime, question. Okay, this is a murder lead up. This is states 33. This is hundreds of pages of her trying to find a victim, her hunting at places where pregnant women are found. That's some pretty intense planning that I would think someone with these deficits you're talking about would have great difficulty with. The way you're talking about Taylor Parker is how is she here? But this is the evidence. So she cannot be that dysfunctional in the frontal lobe if she's able to execute and put together and execute a plan like this. The doctor says, do you want me to question? Yes, that's a question. The doctor responds with, do you want me to respond? She doesn't have cognitive deficits in the sense that, in terms of like specific cognitive, she can plan what she's going to do tomorrow. She can plan things out in the future, but she has, I think what you're showing actually is evidence of that frontal lobe degeneration. These people engage in schemes like this when your frontal lobe doesn't work. An example of disinhibition and impulsivity, like it's planning illegal behavior. That's all part of frontal lobe dysfunction. I think a couple cases I could say that maybe would have needed mental health treatment rather than like prison the death penalty. I was thinking the same thing. They should give Kenzie's brain scan. I'm curious in that. If she was given the DP, then she's fully aware and seen as competent. Hmm. Doctor testifies. Question. Okay. And I think it's kind of a wrap. I think it's to kind of wrap that up. At least, does Taylor Parker have all the criteria to meet the diagnosis for antisocial personality disorder? The doctor says no. Does she have all the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder? No. Does she have all the criteria for histrionic? No. Does she have the criteria for borderline personality? No. Is that why you would use is that why you would use the word condition rather than disorder? Doctor says, well, yeah, it's considered to be a mental condition because it affects the person, the quality of their life, the stability of their life, their inability to maintain relationships, maintain employment, sometimes those sorts of things. But they don't have a full blown disorder as we diagnose it. When examining all the evidence, the doctor concludes. Question. So, based on everything you looked at, is there, when you were talking about possibility versus probability, I'm not going to ask you the ultimate question, is there a probability, but in your opinion, and everything that you've looked at, is Taylor Parker a future danger? The doctor says, if I said yes, I could not support that on any kind of literature study or information that I have. So that means my answer is I cannot predict that she will continue to be dangerous. Now, she will be an aggravation and she will be manipulative and she will continue to lie. On cross examination, Dr. G testifies. Question. So, when you say she has traits of antisocial personality disorder, what traits are you seeing specifically that make you think she has that? The doctor says the tendency to be involved in illegal behavior, to run con kind of issues, to claim things to manipulate regarding finances for her benefit, things that are antisocial or asocial. Question. You also have said that somebody with antisocial personality disorder, that conduct is knowing that somebody's conduct is wrong, but not caring or wanting to change it. Would you say she falls into that category? Doctor says, well, I don't know whether she does or not actually, because of the type of personality that she has and with a pathological lying, people with that condition don't change that of their own volition. Question. Well, I mean, doctor says that doesn't necessarily come under antisocial. The pathological lying is unlikely to change, particularly not without extensive treatment and a setting in which she's not going to find it available. This is interesting. Question. She told a correctional officer after she was convicted, so this would have been in October of 2022, that she had to sit in here for 3 weeks and listen to her be shamed by us with a bunch of lies. That is not somebody that is remorseful or taking responsibility for their actions, in my opinion. Would you agree with that? The doctor says, well, that statement certainly doesn't indicate remorse. Question. Right. But I also think doctor says that statement is just a lie. Well, sure. But I mean, you're saying you saw her once in October of 2022. That statement was made in October of 2022. So she's telling whoever, whatever, that she decides to tell him that day. The doctor says that is. She has a character defect, and that's cut from the same piece of cloth. Interesting. Okay, so when you're talking about she is going to be manipulative and continue to lie, okay, that situation sets up a very dangerous scenario for the other inmates and the correctional officers in a prison setting. Would you not agree with that? Answer, it could. In rebuttal, the state called Dr. Proctor. Dr. Proctor testified that he did not see any evidence of mental disease or defect that would qualify as something he would include in his report. Dr. Proctor then testified. Question. What would be an example of something that you would or have on occasion, made of note with this testing in these interviews? Dr. Proctor replies, sure. Well, like a severe mental disease, schizophrenia is certainly an excellent example. Schizoaffective disorder, which is a type of schizophrenia, could be bipolar disorder. You could have a major depressive disorder that was severe and even had what's called psychotic features, which means the person is out of touch with reality. You could have some other conditions that could fall into mental disease. Mental defect would be something like an intellectual disability, which is what we used to call mental, oh, I hate that word, the R word, mental retardation, or some kind of severe neurological problem, like a dementia or, someone who has serious head injury that resulted in serious cognitive problems. So that's what I'm referring to there. Question. And of all those examples that you just gave, the jury are things that you have sort of screened for and have seen in the past, known how to recognize, and that it's just not the situation with Taylor Parker? Doctor says, correct. Dr. Proctor then discussed the standardized tests that he administered to appellant. Based on these tests, Dr. Proctor concluded that appellant presents with psychopathic traits. He opined. Question. Okay. And then the border personality. Here's some things: antisocial and histrionic personality traits. We talk about that PCLR again, the presence of pathological lying and manipulativeness. Talk about that for just a second. The doctor says, sure. Well, I mean, part of what came out of the assessment with this thing called the PCLR, which is the psychopathy checklist, is that there were certain traits that, she clearly had. And in particular, the pathological lying and manipulativeness are clearly established. That is part of the personality disorder that she has. And then she also has, related to that, what are called antisocial traits, which antisocial isn't like wanting to keep to yourself or being shy. It's the tendency to be willing to break rules, not follow laws, which she certainly has a history of reckless disregard for others, being irresponsible and lacking remorse. And then the histrionic piece is the being real expressive emotionally and engaging in a lot of attention seeking behavior that has kind of dramatic equality of a dramatic quality to it. They ask, okay, and then the jury has heard the malingering. I mean, it's gross exaggeration of feigning of difficulties. This is, you've identified some factors that were present. What are those factors? The doctor says, so the book we use to diagnose mental problems is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We call it the DSM for short. Fifth edition text revision is the current one, and it lists four factors that if these four factors are present, if there's some combination of them, then you should suspect malingering. Does not mean someone is malingering, does not mean someone is faking, but it means it's a red flag to consider. So if you have somebody that is a medico legal context, which means something like a criminal case, like we're involved in, then there's big discrepancy between the person's claimed stress or disability and the objective findings and observations, which we have here. Lots of inconsistencies. My test results that indicated exaggerating and feigning. There's some lack of cooperation during diagnostic evaluation and in complying with prescribed treatment. And this again goes to like the test results, as well as giving information that differs from doctor to doctor. And then finally, if there's a presence of antisocial personality disorder, which I didn't find full of antisocial personality disorder, there are some traits of that. So these things are listed here because they are indications that I believe malingering should be considered here. And so then I go to discuss what my thoughts are on that. I would be really interested to see. Hi, Diana. Good to see you, love. And hello, Lindsay baby. Just got home from work. Hey, thanks for being here. I would really, really would love to see these tests done on Kenzie. Like, I would like to see these things, mental health, all of this stuff, like her brain and stuff. Doesn't my does my question make sense? Don't know if I worded that correctly. It's is the relevance of whether she has official disease or diagnosis a factor and whether or not the DP can be sentenced. I think it does, right? I saw that catching on the bag of the it's starting to yeah, I agree, Melly. I agree 100%. Yeah, I think I'm not excusing her, Kenzie, but I think it would be interesting to see that. Analysis. As the record indicates, Dr. Proctor's rebuttal testimony was not outside the scope of the appellant's expert testimonies. Appellant's experts testified that the appellant had brain atrophy and traits of several psychiatric disorders. The state rebutted those conclusions through Dr. Proctor's testimony that ruled out the appellant's psychiatric disorders and instead attributed her behavior to psychopathy. In fact, Dr. G testified that the appellant's antisocial personality disorder traits led her to be involved in illegal behavior, to run con kind of issues, to claim things, to manipulate regarding finances to her benefit. Dude, why does that sound like Kenzie? She's deaf, just undiagnosed. Yeah. Like, right? Dr. Proctor attributed the same traits to psychopathy through the psychopathy checklist. Is it psychopathy? Psychopath. Yeah. Based on the testimony in the record, Dr. Proctor's testimony was limited to the issues raised by the defense experts. Because the appellant introduced psychiatric evidence in some form, the state could also introduce psychiatric evidence in some form. This error is overruled. Conclusion: finding no reversible error, we affirm the judgment of the trial court. Today, the court affirms appellant's concurring opinion. Appellant's capital murder conviction. I write separately to highlight the important distinction within the penal code. Appellant was convicted of capital schmurder for committing a schmurder while committing or attempting to commit a kidnapping. Kidnapping falls under Chapter 20 Penal Code. A person commits the offense of kidnapping when he intentionally or knowingly abducts another person. As the majority correctly notes, under the kidnapping provisions, a person is an individual. The kidnapping statute further defines what is an individual, specifically stating, and notwithstanding section 1.07, individual means a human being who has not been born and is alive. The term notwithstanding should be emphasized. Generally, notwithstanding means in spite of or nevertheless. Thus, the statute signals that despite the definition in 1.07 of the code, an individual here, as applied only to the kidnapping statute, means that a person that has not been born and is alive. So, what does 1.07 say, and that we should be ignoring it for kidnapping offenses? Section 1.07 contains definition that apply to the entire code. This definition is very different from that in the kidnapping statute. Under the kidnapping statute, a person can only commit an offense against one another who has been born and is alive. On the other hand, for all the other criminal offenses committed against an individual, unless otherwise specifically designated, the code covers individuals both born and alive, as well as an unborn child at every state of gestation, from fertilization until birth. The effect of the separate definitions is critical. For example, a person commits the offense of schmurder when the person intentionally or knowingly causes the death of an individual. Because an individual is not explicitly defined in the statute, it follows the overall penal code definition. In other words, a person who commits schmurder when he intentionally or knowingly causes the death of a human being who is alive, including an unborn child at every state of gestation from fertilization until birth. The same construction can be said for the offense of manslaughter. Even capital schmurder can be sustained for the death of a pregnant mother. Mm, interesting. Explaining that the appellant was convicted of capital murder for murdering a mother and her 13-week-old unborn child. Oh, they're talking about the other case. But the same cannot be said for kidnapping. Because of the plain language of 20.01, an offender cannot be charged with 2 counts of kidnapping for abducting a pregnant mother. With this in mind, how do these two definitions impact Taylor's case? The state charged appellant with capital schmurder for causing the death of Braxlin's mother, while in the course of kidnapping or attempting to kidnap Braxlin herself, meaning the evidence had to show appellant kidnapped Braxlin while she was born and alive and not in gestation. This makes the definition of an individual under the kidnapping statute important here. It was arguably the most contested issue in the case. Further, the kidnapping statute's definition of individual means we must set aside for the purpose of kidnapping question the general definition of individual that says an unborn child are people too. Because the statute limits which victims can be kidnapped, proof of Braxton having been born and alive was essential. If this had not been the case, if the state had could have convicted appellant for kidnapping or attempted to kidnap Braxton, whether she was born or alive or still in gestation, then the issue of whether Braxton took her first breath would not have been determinative of the case. Taking this into account, the evidence was sufficient to show that Braxton was born and alive, undeniably a person and an individual. Critically, one would not truly see the dichotomy without keeping keying in on the word notwithstanding and how important that word really is to lawyers. The bench and the bar are prone to home in one trigger, words like notwithstanding. Law school teaches prospective lawyers to be wary of these modifiers. And it would be imprudent for a practitioner to see a definition that uses words like notwithstanding and compare it to the reference section. This is simply statutory construction. But while those who have studied the law are aware of these flags, it does not mean that members of the public are prone to that understanding as well. The public may be better aided if the kidnapping statute more clearly signaled that its definition of an individual is not the same as the definition of an individual as it applies to the rest of the code. A more universally understood signal, such as despite or regardless, could be useful, but an added explanation clarifying the difference between 1.07 and 20.01 may be ideal. For example, the statute could read, despite the section 1.07 definition of an individual, which includes unborn child at every stage of gestation, an individual under this chapter means only a human being who has been born and is alive. Regardless, until an update is made, we are bound to to a comprehension of the term notwithstanding. To make our holding today simple and to assist citizens in deconstructing these small but mighty distinctions, I write to emphasize the two definitions of an individual in the Penal Code. All things considered, this court is well aware of the clear meaning of the Penal Code. Many criminal offenses can be committed against a person, including an unborn child, a child whose life begins at fertilization. Under Penal Code, unborn children are individuals, but limiting its class of victims, per the kidnapping statute, a person can only kidnap an individual who's born and alive. I concur with the court's holding on the merits, but write separately to make it clear, for the benefit of the parties and the public alike, that in the Penal Code, unborn children are individuals and therefore people too. For the record, I will also say that I strongly agree with 1.07 definition of an individual. Yet there lies a critical difference in the kidnapping statute definition of an individual compared to that which we apply to the rest of the code. Filed November 6, 2025. Crazy. Wow. I need to rewatch that documentary again. I want to review a documentary I saw too. On this case. I think it would be interesting to review that with you guys. Yeah, I know. I found out. I posted on my socials about Kenzie's thing. I want to talk about it, but let's do that tonight. Oh, really? Yeah, the Innocence Project. Yeah, I know. That's another one. But what should count the baby was not alive in her hands. Oh, I see what you're saying, Evie. Yeah. Did the baby survive? No. No, the baby in this case. Hi, Tricky. No, no, no. Well, I'll have to watch it now. I know. You do. There was a documentary that did like a really damn good job too. So maybe we'll review that. So we're gonna go over tomorrow we'll go over the investigators' interviews and maybe we can watch a documentary together. I have to look in my history to see who it was. They did a good job too. They gave all the details that this appeal gave. Yeah, I know, Evie. I know. Watch it. Watch it, Cynthia. I'm gonna watch it too. Okay, so we got the appeal done. Tomorrow, I've already been live for 2.5 hours. Tomorrow we'll read the offense report. That one is wild too. Oh wait, let me change my screen. And oh wait, we'll maybe go over that in the investigators tomorrow because that one's like 30 pages, but that's half of what we just read. So it should be easy. Um, I'm kind of into this Taylor Parker case too, but there's not, from what I've seen, there's not a lot of documents. So I'm going to be filing a FOIA. Yes, please hit the like button. Thank you for those of you that were here hanging out. I will probably be back for Kenzie in a little bit. I don't know if I was gonna do the text, but I kind of want to do like a hangout and talk and review stuff. So I'll see. Keep your eye out for the notification. Shout out to you guys for being here. Taylor Parker looks like, wait, what happens after this? So she's been denied. So does that mean she just waits on death row now? Or does she have options to like file again because it's different in death penalty cases? I need to look into that. Because I think this was her final appeal. Let me look that up. That's interesting. It says there's no execution date. She exhausted her appeals. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld Parker's conviction. Okay, yeah, we know. In May of 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case. Her attorneys had attempted to argue that extensive media. Okay, we already covered that. Okay, this doesn't really give much. I know that Kenzie still has options. I don't know what those look like, but I don't know if it's the same like on death when you have the death penalty. So that would be interesting. Maybe we'll look at that when we talk about Kenzie. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right. I don't know. Does she have any appeals left? Taylor? No, I think she's exhausted everything. I think this was a final one. But like I don't know if the rules are different, you know? She can appeal to federal Melly. Oh, Taylor too? So that's what Kenzie is gonna probably do. I don't know if Kenzie's gonna do a habeas corpus and then federal, but baby, that I want it to go federal. I want to see if they can uncover a lot of their stuff that I have questions about personally. No, not Taylor. Oh, okay. Taylor doesn't, right? Taylor can't take it federally. She's just gonna wait. She's just gonna wait till it's her day, I guess, right? Mm, I don't think so, Alexa. Not Taylor. Kenzie can. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Taylor can anymore. Hmm. I'll have to do some research. Yeah, I agree, ATS. I do agree. All right. Thank you guys for being here and supporting. I'll be back with another live later. Make sure to follow me on X and TikTok because I be going live over there more than here on well, at least as of recent on TikTok. Um they just sit forever. Hmm. Well, RIP Reagan and Braxland. Awful, awful what happened to them. So my condolences go out to their family. Please make sure y'all hit the like button on the way out, and I will see you guys on the next live. Toodles.